I apologize for all the background noise. That's what you get in suburbia. The traffic. Somebody's mowing his yard and there's a woodpecker making noise. What I wanted to tell you about in this video, I've been getting a couple of comments on one of my videos about prayer, because I guess I made a statement somebody disagreed with, and the comment that was made was that saying that God answers prayers is not scriptural, because I had made the statement that he answers all prayers and he either says yes, no, or wait, or later. And they said that that's not scriptural. And the comment has been deleted by the commenter, I think, because now the comment's not there anymore, but I didn't delete it. I was gonna, I read it, I took a night to think about how to respond, and then the next day I went to respond, the comment wasn't there. But somebody else commented along the same lines, a little different, just saying, asking about, about how do you acknowledge God. And so I want to say this about prayer. The Bible does say that there are some prayers that God doesn't hear, or prayers of some people he doesn't hear. And whether or not he doesn't hear them or not, or he does hear them but chooses to ignore them, it's a moot point. Like, why even argue about that? He doesn't acknowledge the prayer, so it doesn't matter if he hears it and ignores it or just doesn't hear it. It doesn't really matter, okay? It's just like, it's like arguing over semantics. I mean, you're arguing over something that doesn't really make a difference. And if I use that word incorrectly, somebody post up and correct me. But when you're one of God's people, and there's a lot of different opinions out there about what makes you one of God's people. So I want to say, always fall back on what the scriptures say and read what Jesus says, okay? Because Jesus is how we know God, how we get to know God. And he said, nobody comes to the Father except through me, Jesus. So you have to get to know Jesus in order to get to know God, if that makes sense. I'm gonna fall back on a saying I saw one time, and it says, if God could be understood by man's wisdom, he would not be worthy of our worship. So there are times where I may not understand everything fully and may not be able to explain it to you in a way that you can comprehend fully, but that's where we have to just trust in God, trust in Jesus Christ, okay? So when it comes to answering prayers, when somebody makes a request of you, you only have two ways to answer, yes or no. When somebody asks you for something or to do something, there's only two ways to answer, yes or no. However, the yes could be conditional. Yes, if, yes, but, okay? And it could be yes, if you do this, and, if you do this, or yes, but you've got to wait. So there are conditional answers in the yes department, but there's only two ways to answer a request, yes or no. That's it. There's maybe's not an answer, because that's just... I also want to tell you a story that will give you a different perspective on about how God answers prayers. Now, when we pray to God for something, of course we want Him to grant our request. But you have to remember that there might be other things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a true story, and I'm going to try to tell you the story without crying about it. It is something that happened to me, and it's about my dad, who passed away a while ago. And other than my husband, I can tell you that there's nobody in the world that I love more than my dad. Because my dad knew things about me that I wouldn't admit to other people. And what I didn't admit to him, he surmised. And yet he loved me and cherished me. Anyway. So my dad had some serious health problems near the end of his life. He was on kidney dialysis, and just he was not very healthy, and he wasn't very happy because he was always a very strong, healthy, active person, and near the end of his life he couldn't do anything, and he was tied down because of having to go to kidney dialysis, and he was just not very happy. And my mom, who is my stepmom, really, she came into my dad's life much later in life, and she called me one day. Her name is Carolyn, but I call her Mom. And she called me one day to tell me that my dad was in the hospital and that they didn't expect him to make it. They didn't think he was going to make it through the night. And unfortunately, there was no way I could pack up and go. So yep, they lived pretty far away on the other side of the United States. I didn't have the means to just up and go. And she said, I'll be honest, I don't even think he's going to make it a day. And I put her on hold, and I told her that I was going to call the pastor. And I called up the pastor of our church at the time, and I said, I need you and everybody else in the church, every prayer warrior we have, to please pray that my dad can make it till I can get down there. He would be healed and of this affliction, and that he wouldn't die. And the pastor is praying with me on the phone, and there were other people that he did like this group phone call thing, and there were all these people on the phone praying, and people in their homes on their knees praying, and I was on my knees praying. And while we were all praying out loud in one accord that my dad would make it, the phone beeps that I got another call coming in, and it was my mom. And she butted in to say, he just passed away. And I gotta be honest with you, I was floored. I hung up the phone, I hung up on everybody. And I sat there screaming at God, like, and cursing at him, like, are you kidding me? You've got all these Christians believing in faith
and praying their hearts out that my dad would make it at least a couple more days to give me time to get down there. And he dies while we're praying for him? And I'm like, I was so angry. I was so upset that I looked up at God and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. I cursed. I'll be honest with you. I cursed. And I really need a tissue. As I'm cursing him out, I all of a sudden felt like I needed to just stop and wait and listen. Like, it was like something told me to just shut up and listen. So I took a deep breath and I just sat there, and I sat there on the floor, and I felt some peace start to come over me, and the phone rang again, and it was my mom again. And I answered the phone, and she said, listen, daughter. She used to call me daughter, which was really cute. She said, listen, daughter, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she said, last night I was sitting with your dad in his hospital room, and he needed, I left the room for a minute, and he was praying. And she says, I'll be honest, I stood outside the door so he couldn't see me, and I eavesdropped and I listened to his prayer. And he was praying to God that he'd had a good life, and he was thankful for his life, but that he was ready to go home now. And that he wanted to go home to heaven, the new system, whatever you want to call it, but that he was ready. And then she said, I just wanted you to know that maybe it'll give you some peace, knowing that he'd felt like his life was good and he had a good life, and that he was ready to go home. And I hung up the phone. And for those of you that say that God doesn't speak audibly to people today, yes, he does. Because I was alone in the house, and I heard a soft, audible voice. It wasn't soft like a whisper, but it wasn't like a thundering, screaming voice. It was just a very strong, soft voice that said, "Rich prayer. Which prayer would you have me answer? His or yours?" And at that point, I had to ask God to forgive me for cursing him out and for being so selfish to pray and ask for what I wanted without thinking about what my father may have been praying for. My father was praying to go home, to be with the Lord. And his was the better prayer. So when you think God hasn't answered your prayer, you might want to look at another perspective and see why. And I'm sorry for crying and my nose dripping on the video. You did know that sleeves were for dripping noses, right? So I want you to have a good day today. I want you to tell somebody in your life how much you love them, and share your love of Christ with them. And while you're at it, hug your dog and go play with your dog too. Have a blessed day.